title of the Bled Strategic Forum is the power of the future. Where is the future? It's here, it's here. I think the power might be afterwards, afternoon starting, but may I say, being by myself something like a dinosaur, it's quite more important that the younger generation knows how to go on. So far it's an excellent idea which is done here, and I'm quite happy and honored, I think, to moderate it. What means moderating? First of all, I'm asking the panelists to stay strictly to 5 minutes. We are quite a huge panel, but we will give the opportunity also of a question and answer period here, because I was asked we have to close precisely at 10:30, because the next panel is looking to the future, and I think we cannot block them. I have one technical request: please be so kind and open your mobile phones afterwards. I think it makes it easier, and it is more friendly and socially if we are doing so. The theme is, I think, quite interesting: the Western Balkans in 2020, in the eyes of 20-year-olds. I think that's more than justified, because looking back 20 years, and I was very much involved, and I'm still partly what has happened in the Balkans. I'm not a friend of the expression Western Balkans, because you will never find it in geography or history. It is an invention of the European Commission, because I think, obviously, to avoid the expression the states out of former Yugoslavia minus Slovenia plus Albania, this would be the correct formula, but I think it will change if Croatia is joining the European Union. I'm quite interested in what they will invent. This is not the key question. The key question is what's going on in this part of Europe in the relation to the other parts of Europe, because it's for sure Europe, and we are living in a time where everything is revolving, also the role of Europe. And here geographically, and so far strategically, this area of Southeast Europe has a great importance. And to go to the generation of 2020, I think you have to do the job. And what your perspectives are and what you are intending to do is quite important. So I'm asking you not to look to the history. We are doing it often enough. And the history is for sure a burden, and we have to do a lot, starting from reconciliation and without any doubts. But I think the question is your own future, and which contribution you can do in this direction, what you are intending to do, what will be the contribution of the region for Europe and for the global world, because the reality is that we are living in the global village. So far, I think it's extremely important. I'm always deeply impressed by European neighborhood policy, because we are all neighbors. I think everything is neighborhood policy in this time. And if your generation is not aware of this, then we are totally lost. But I'm quite sure by these participants, we are not really lost. We have a perspective. My job is now to present the participants to you. It's Ms. Sanja Bulatovic. She's a graduate in international relations from the Faculty of Political Science from Montenegro. Ms. Emina Vucinkic, Secretary General of the Croatian Youth Network, Croatia. Mr. Amran Čaferović, Faculty of Mechanical Engineering, University of Sarajevo. Mrs. Natalia Ferles from Slovenia, student of International Relations at the Faculty of Social Science. Mr. Badi Hasanpapai, he is teaching assistant at the Faculty of Law in Pristina, Kosovo. And Mrs. Jasmina Drajkovska, teaching assistant at the Faculty of Political Science, Diplomacy and Journalism at the FON University of Macedonia. And last but not least, Ivan Revolda, student at the Faculty of Political Sciences at the University of Belgrade. So far, not to lose time, no remarks anymore. I'm following here the alphabetical order. Mrs. Bulatovic, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. I would first like to greet Dr. Busak, our participants, and the audience. The Western Balkans in 2020, it's a very interesting topic, especially because of the phrase itself, what Dr. Busak already mentioned. So when we were young, when we were born, there was no such thing as Western Balkans. There was only Yugoslavia, certain peacemakers, the war, and the Balkans. And after that, it all changed, and the region was destroyed by the war. It was economically degraded, and it's lost all its geopolitical importance due to political instability and the lack of cooperation among newly born countries. And then the things started to change, and we started talking about European integration. The countries of former Yugoslavia began to believe that it is time to be again in the Union, this time richer, better, and decentralized, like the EU. So the EU, the European Commission, coined the term Western Balkans to comprise Albania and former Yugoslavia countries except Slovenia. And it was an attempt to redefine the region and to point out that the promotion of one of these countries has to be a product of cooperation among all of them. So now, as we have the process of the European integration, we have also many problems left to solve. First of all, many of the politicians who were part of the political life during the 90s are still active in political life. They are still main decision makers. And so the war itself is influencing their political opinions, their political actions. So we need to start moving forward, forgetting the war, and start cooperating in a true manner. So I believe that when we speak about the Western Balkans in 2020, the situation is going to be much better. And one factor is the most important, and it's the young people. People who are now here today with us, they will in 2020 become important persons. They will become someone who will participate in political life in a great manner, and their ability to cooperate among themselves, regardless of the war, the fact that they have no personal recollection of the war will be something of huge importance, because they will not care about the past, but they will lead to more peaceful cooperation with their neighbors. When we speak about the future, I believe that the future of the Western Balkans is definitely in the EU. But what we must not forget is that the EU is not panacea. It is not a universal cure for everything, and EU membership will not solve all our political and economic problems. So we need to be aware that the economic prosperity and political stability are our main goals, not the EU itself. So all the reforms that we have to impose, or that are imposed by the EU, but that we have to implement, are something that we have to do in order to make our lives better, not just to join the EU. So what are the main problems? We should fight corruption at the highest level. And when I speak about these problems, I think that they are very important in Montenegro, but also in all other Western Balkan countries. So we have to fight corruption at the highest level. We have to change people's perception of nepotism and teach them that exercising influence should not be something that would lead to breaking the law. We should also keep our borders safer, because that is very important for the EU and ourselves. We should fight harder to stop drug trafficking, people trafficking, and we should start debating on how to solve our border issues and how to improve our economy. So I believe that the cooperation we have now is a good way to go. We have all sorts of meetings and initiatives, such as Bled Strategic Forum, but also very important to the Southeast European Cooperation Process, Adriatic Union Initiative, or Central European Free Trade Agreement. They are all very good ways to start cooperating, to start bringing some good decisions that will bring us to a more peaceful cooperation. So I would just say that the young people in this process have the ability to engage in more fruitful cooperation, and that we need to think now, what can we, the young people, do now in 2010 or 2011 to have the future that we want in 2020. Thank you.
Thank you very much for keeping the time frame. The next is from Croatia, Emina Buzinkic.
Thank you for the announcing, and it's a pleasure to be here. I'm quite warmly surprised with the fact that youth are starting this forum, which is not the case very usually. Few opening remarks by saying two sentences. There's no future without past, and youth are not the generation of the future. Youth are the actor of today, and in that manner I will open several questions. As we are all aware, our ex-Yugoslav countries, and I will not use the term Western Balkans, are burdened seriously with political and economic problems, and the heavy inheritance of war never let up, and countries are sinking more into division and violence. And in many things, situations can be described as running in the same place, if not even taking a step backwards. And these issues affect not only different social groups, but also youth as a specific social group, and more they affect our status towards European Union. Social political changes of our landscape, and I will name it this time Yugosphere, are extremely influential to young generations, even though many of them haven't been warned during the 90s. And speaking from my personal and professional experience, youth in Croatia and other ex-Yugoslav countries carry a pretty heavy burden of war and war crimes, while having a really hard time of understanding war action, its causes, and today's consequences. The environment we grow in is often very selective and offers pretty much biased historical perspectives. This is quite a burden to carry. If we come to the solutions of this, even at the very beginning, I would offer one very specific one, which is dealing with the past, thinking of past as our focus, multi-layered, pure dealing with the past that will reconcile our today, our presence, and makes further steps for future. If I'm concerned, dealing with the past opens perspectives of justice and development while taking into account different experiences and social healing, what is very important for young generations today. And all dealing with the past theories and perspectives put in attention or in focus the lives and future of young generations. Young generations who will take responsibility today for tomorrow, who will know how to retell stories and experiences of their grandparents, and who will know how to renew and re-establish social relationships with youth and societies from Yugosphere. I strongly believe young generations are strong generators of changes in future if smartly grown and educated. That actually means non-biased historical education, multi-leveled formal and non-formal civic education, and building critical thinking skills towards social political issues such as future of Balkans of approaching European Union. Among young generations there is growing Euroscepticism, to be honest, understandable one. As much as EU will bring to young people, to this region, many developing perspectives and opportunities, such as education opportunities, it will bring to us its own failure of human rights policies, policies towards youth, religious minorities, etc. Even though European Union is our inevitable near or far future, we should have a focus on restoring social-political relations in Yugosphere and deal with our past in order to reconcile presence and influence towards tomorrow's development.
Thank you very much. Also, thank you for your remarks concerning history. I think we should discuss what the role of history is and for the future. The next is Amra Čaferović from Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Hello everyone.
You asked me how does people...
Hello everyone. You ask how does people from Bosnia and Herzegovina see Western Balkan 2020? I come from Bosnia and Herzegovina, so I'm able to speak only for Bosnia and Herzegovina and on behalf of its citizens. Therefore, we are asking you, do you want an idealistic view of Bosnia in 2020,
or more of a realistic one? When it comes to an ideal one, we would say that we see our country as a fully developed country in which, when you ask any of its citizens who they are, their response would be, I'm a satisfied citizen of Bosnia and Herzegovina. We see it as a country in which social, economic, and educational issues are above political ones. We see it as a country that is in EU, as a country in which renewable energy sources are at least 20% of all energy production. And finally, we see it as it is, as a country of many potentials, natural as well as human ones. But let's talk more realistically. 2020 is not so far away. It's 8 years from now. Or politically speaking, it's 2 government and 2 regional elections away. Do we really think that something huge will change if we continue to progress so slowly as we did so far? Many of us lived in Bosnia and Herzegovina during 1992 and 1995. We remember it from that period, and we can say that we did recover from that period, no matter what the rest of the world thinks. Things are better, but they can be much better. I'm not here to represent myself. I'm here to represent every citizen from Bosnia and Herzegovina, no matter which part of Bosnia they are from. I believe I speak on behalf of every one of them when I say that some issues in Bosnia and Herzegovina are currently not being resolved. In Sarajevo there is a bridge. It's called Goat Bridge. Legend says that on that place, 2 goats wanted to cross a bridge, each one on the opposite side. And neither one of them wanted to let the other one go first. So eventually, they clashed their horns, and legend says that they stayed on that place until they died. Constitutional issue in our country are, so to say, goat issue. At this moment, we can't do anything to change it without making compromise. I think I'm speaking not on behalf of politicians, but on behalf of common citizens of Bosnia and Herzegovina, when I say, is the constitutional issue really the only issue in our country at this moment? Truth be told, the constitution issue is not the one that is worrying citizens of Bosnia and Herzegovina. We have social issues, educational, economic. If we can't agree on constitution at this way, why couldn't we improve social, economic education? All of us have finished our elementary, our high school, and now we are finishing our colleges in Bosnia and Herzegovina. I can speak with certainty when I say that education quality in our country is very high, and that you can accomplish great things without a degree. Also, I think we are able, as a 20-year-olds, to say what we think we need to do in order to improve things. We need to try to fix those problems that we can fix at this moment. How? We need to invest in education. Firstly, we need to educate people. We need to decrease illiteracy rate. If we have educated people on some crucial positions, then we can hope for a better future. And education is our way to better and brighter future. When people become more educated, then they will be able to see things objectively, not subjectively. Bosnia and Herzegovina is a country of great possibilities and potentials. We are a multi-ethnical and multinational country in which East and West join and combine in one beautiful, heart-shaped piece of Europe. We have great touristic potentials, historical as well as natural. We also have potential for renewable energy, and we know that that is a main topic today in the world. Most of all, we are a country with high rate of young people, and it is up to us, the young ones, to educate ourselves and to focus our potential into Bosnia and Herzegovina. We have possibility to be a role model for many countries all over the world, and to show to the rest of the world that many nations and many religions can exist in peace and harmony. Realistically, we see Bosnia and Herzegovina 2020 as a country in which renewable energy sources makes at least 10% of all energy production. We see it as a country in which young people are highly educated, inspired and proactive, as well as focused on improving things and being the changes you want to see, as cliche as it may sound. We envision it as a country which is overflowed with tourists, and with tourism as a respectable source of finance. And we see it as a country in which all of its citizens are proud to be Bosnian and Herzegovinian. At the end, all I can say is that we are all proud to be citizens of Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Thank you very much for a great statement. I think, I hope that it is realized what you are saying.
It is.
especially I was deeply impressed, as you said, you are speaking on behalf of all the Bosnians. Sometimes it's very difficult to find somebody who is speaking about all the Bosnians together. But this is a question, I think, for discussion. I'm asking now Natalia Ferlis from Slovenia.
Thank you very much. The Western Balkans region has always been characterized with coexistence of different cultures, religions, and peoples. The course of history and political processes have shaped the region as a region of complex relations and challenging issues, which today include high levels of corruption, unemployment, economic problems, and other issues. However, in comparison with years or a decade ago, progress has been made, particularly in stabilization, democratization, and also neighborhood relations. Countries have established democratic institutions and they are successfully adopting different reforms on their way to the EU. I strongly believe that the future of the whole Western Balkans lies within the EU, which I see as the main factor of, or stimulus in the democratization of the region. Undoubtedly, without the presence of the EU and its pressure, many of the required changes would not happen or would take a much longer time to happen. Therefore, I believe that the EU must not allow slowing down the enlargement process, and it should ensure that its enlargement commitments towards the region remain credible and also realistic. Clearly, enlargement is currently not among the EU priorities due to many reasons such as economic and financial crisis and also problems that previous enlargement cycles have brought. However, I think that a situation in which EU enlargement to the Western Balkans is pushed to the background for a longer period of time could have really negative impact on the pace and also on the quality of the reforms that need to be carried out. This is also influencing the support of people for the EU accession, which is already decreasing across the whole region. I think that the EU must not forget that the achievement of peace, security, and prosperity of the Western Balkans, which can be achieved through the membership of these countries in the EU, will bring also security and peace in the Europe as a whole. Now I would like to point out three major current obstacles to a common future of these countries within the EU. I think these are a continuing dispute between Macedonia and Greece, relations between Serbia and Kosovo, and also a political situation in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Regarding the first two issues, it is clear that the EU will not allow a country hindered by serious bilateral issues and problems with its neighbors to join the EU. And in the case of Bosnia, political stalemate and failure to implement important reforms are hindering any kind of progress of this country. However, I think that if countries would show willingness and most importantly also capability to resolve these issues, the progress of the region towards the EU would be much faster and a lot would happen till 2020. Now I would just like to briefly say something about regional cooperation. I think that the future of the region depends also on the success of establishing regional cooperation, which I see as a crucial mechanism for preventing conflicts in the future and for ensuring continued dialogue between the countries. There are already a number of different initiatives for cooperation in the region. Some are successful, others only partly. Nevertheless, countries need to continue with their efforts in this direction. The disintegration of Yugoslavia had led to the establishment of a number of independent states, but they are still bound together with common geography, history, and above all, shared regional issues. I believe that the right way forward is intensification of regional cooperation, firstly in less sensitive areas, like cultural cooperation, cooperation in science, education, economy, and so on. Later on, I think that the positive experience and mutual trust that will be built through these forms of cooperation can then gradually lead to a more intensified political cooperation, which also requires stronger dedication of countries. Also, inclusion of local institutions, universities, and civil society must be strengthened in order to encourage local identification, motivation, and also bottom-up approach in general. This, together with the promotion of multiculturalism, minority protection, and European values, can gradually replace and overpower different ethnic tensions that still exist in the region. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Picking up questions, I think, which can be done all together. also showing a kind of responsibility of neighbors from your side, from Slovenia, is extremely important, also mentioning the role of culture. The next is Mr. Badi Hasan Papoy from Kosovo.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kusek. Thank you everybody for the good speeches and interesting views about the future as well as for the past. As it was mentioned, I am Bartol Hasan Papoy from Kosovo, teaching at the University of Pristina, working in different projects sometimes with different internationals, with different people from different communities, from Serbian communities, from Turkish communities, Ashkenazi, from Montenegrins, and with so many people from with different backgrounds. What I would want to emphasize today, it's really a short time to say a lot about, but I'll try to say a few things from my perspective as a young individual in Kosovo and in the region, that although we know that we have so many problems, sometimes internally everybody sees the problems of the daily life, especially when you are young. You want to know about a job, how to have a better economy in your country, how you can see more travel around the region in Europe and in other countries. And there are so many things that you plan for the future. Nevertheless, for today, I would say that everything comes from, starts with ourselves, starts at the district where we live, starts at the country where we live, and then continues with the region, with the states that are close to us, as well as then in the EU, where we all want to be, and hopefully the 2020 will not be, although it's only 8 years, but in 8 years we can really do a lot to accomplish the perspective of the European integration, including those countries of the Western Balkans, all those that were from the former Yugoslavia, as well as the Albania. In this respect, starting from internally, everybody, including Kosovo, Macedonia, Montenegro, Albania, as well as Serbia and Bosnia and Herzegovina, should do more in establishing the rule of law in the country, in creating democratic institutions, as well as fighting corruption. Those are preconditions for having economic development and prosperity and stability within the country itself. Regional cooperation, of course, is a very important issue. When it was mentioned in the past in several speeches, and I would say that although we have experienced a lot, we have experienced, especially Kosovo is the last country that has experienced the war, as well as there are a number of things that we still remember. We are a war-torn society. There are missing persons that we still have to deal with from the war. Nevertheless, the good thing is that, let's say in Kosovo, for example, if we go back to the last elections, the party that won the election could not form the coalition to run the government. So it did need the support of the Serbian minority parties, and today we have the government that is running the country, and it's in coalition. The main political, the biggest political parties in coalition with the Serbian minority parties, and they are working very well together. We have 2 deputy prime ministers, one from Albanian side and the one from Serbian minority, who together are working, and I had the chance to participate in one of the meetings to discuss the issues of regional cooperation as well as missing persons. So although 2020 seems too close, we are the ones that we can play the crucial role at this very moment, and start from now to bring to accelerate the changes, because the changes are there. The situation is improving on a daily basis, as well as the cooperation between the states, at least if we try to see the good parts of it. And once we have these internal policies, establish the rule of law, we are more keen in adopting the reforms internally, and if we are cooperating regionally, then I don't see any reason why EU then should stop the enlargement process, because EU from the Thessaloniki agenda from the summit there has several times mentioned the EU perspective of these countries and is repeatedly saying that Western Balkans belong to the European Union. Of course, we know that there are internal problems in the European Union, but I would say that the European Union has been doing a lot to convince those countries that the right way to proceed forward is to adopt internal reforms and pursue the European path of integration. And now I think is the right time for those countries not let EU to stop with the enlargement process and go every so often to Brussels and convince them that we have done our homework and we are regionally cooperating and we belong to EU as well, and to change that dynamic accelerated. We can talk more, but I'm sure that there will be questions from the other side, so I'll close here. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Also for the EU perspective, I think really the partners within the member states of the European Union to discuss it was terrific. The next is Jasmina Trakowska from Macedonia.
Thank you. I'd like to say that 2020 is close, but the EU and NATO are so far from us. Yesterday we celebrate 20 years of independent state Republic of Macedonia. Whether we maturated enough as the state is a constant question posed by experts, the young people, and the rest of the citizens. The primary preoccupation of young people in our country is politics. Not because they really want to participate, but as a result of socio-economic situation which is unsatisfying. We constantly go backwards through a series of events, anti-accusation and local patriotistic feelings in respect where we descend from and where our roots are. Are we familiar enough with our identity as Macedonians? Alexander the Great, or the Great is our main antique celebrity of whom we are proud. But why all that if we are not members of EU and NATO? Has someone spoken to the youth about this issue? Certainly, since the government has won the elections, it has the right to make decisions untransparently and without taking advices, but with the marketing campaigns that leave us convinced that black is white. The vision of Europe, more precisely the European Union, is the unification of the Western Balkans country in the European society. The question is whether all countries believe in that. Yes, in public it seems like it. All countries in the Balkan want to be members of the EU, but not all of them fulfill the criteria or even try to fulfill them according to the EU regulations. The Western Balkan countries are moving in different directions. Unfortunately, the Republic of Macedonia is without compass in respect of this issue. Does anyone remember the Adriatic Charter, or what was the result from the last summit in the Southeastern Initiative? Does anyone remember the regional initiative introduced by USA or the Stability Pact of EU? How many forums for the Western Balkans were held in the last years and how did they influence on the Western Balkans? Why are the regional initiatives become more and more fragmented, and where is the end of the regional position of our country? And why do we even discuss about cross-border cooperating with the neighbors on a presidential level when EU already does that for a long time in the region? The great idea of forming some sort of Balkan Union for the four countries, similar to the Visegrad Group, is dangerous and without a long-term logic. The Visegrad Group was guaranteed and associated to EU with a best procedure, while such Balkan Union could last for a long time. In the end, it won't know what is the purpose was. Regional cooperate of the youth is only on the short-term basis. How much do young people from the region have the possibility to cooperate, to be supported actively and to jointly participate in the decision-making process on a local, national, regional level, which within regional frames would contribute to faster European integration. Therefore, the young people are witnessing the reform conducted by our government, which definitely made the chaos in our society, where neither the citizen nor the young and are involved. They are literally placed in the margins of the Republic of Macedonia. The employment is the best excuse for the brain drain. The party's employment is the public secret. And like a conclusion, I would like to say that the Western Balkan countries still have to work on a mutual respect so that they can fulfill the imposed task for the European Union. However, we the young people should interested that we should assemble the puzzle all together. We should create a society in which we would like to live and not let someone else create it for us. We should not look for salvation in leaving the country, but we should fight for our rights. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Especially for mentioning the problem of brain drain, because this is connected with your future. Last but not least, Ivan Revolta is beginning of the alphabet.
Yes, I would like to thank Dr. Busse for giving me the word, and I would like to say how very happy I am that today I'm on this panel with 6 former countrymen and today's dear neighbors. And the topic today, I think it's very meaningful for us as 20-year-olds in the region of the Western Balkans, because hopefully in 2020 we'll all be in the prime of our lives, and we should be sort of at the top, and from there maybe going down. I think that in 2020, and I believe most of you will agree with me, that the Western Balkans should be, if not in the EU, at least very close to being in the EU, with all of us hopefully having accession dates. Now, today I would like to talk about 2 things. I would like to talk about what I think should be changed in Serbia as a country, and also about how the youth views the progress of our country towards the EU. First of all, I'd like to say that the challenges of Serbia entering the EU are, first of all, dealing with the past as a way of going forward with our future, with reconciliation, and just generally building upon maybe the good things in our past to have better relations in our neighborhood. I think there's also a great need for the development of stronger democratic institutions as a way of making a sort of developing a democratic political culture, as opposed to today's sort of shifting of parties, where every time new elections are won, completely everything changes. So I think that there's a big need for a democratic political culture, as well as the rule of law and the deeper respect for human rights, which are nominally very much enforced, but not so, I think, generally. But I would also like to say, as Vadil pointed out, that we have to start from ourselves. We have to start with our own mentality. We have to see that that the conditions that we have from the EU that as a requirement to enter it are not a punishment. They're something that we choose freely to do, and as a way of joining the EU, and as a way of hopefully living in a more prosperous future. And not to think that the European Union is a solution to all our problems, that when we do enter the European Union, we still have to have a lot of strength from ourselves. Not all our problems will be solved. We have to have these. We have to have the right mentality about it. It's not something that's given on a plate, and that's, I think, a very important thing to have in mind. Also, I think today's youth is a bit disillusioned with the European Union, especially now with a lot of problems racking the Union itself, especially economic ones, because of course it slows the enlargement process. And I think that that there needs to be a bit more positive motivation from the Union itself, just so people know. And of course, I think the most important thing that has happened in the past is, of course, the White Schengen in Serbia, which was, I think, for the youth, the most important thing that could have happened as far as EU integrations are concerned. And I think there should just generally be more sort of positive incentives, not, and I think the youth feel as sort of, there's only conditions and conditions, but that's not true. I mean, that's also the fault of the state, because I don't think there's enough publicity about how much the EU helps our country. And as I said, hopefully we'll all be, as the Western Balkans, in the European Union, and that's important. It's important to build good relations between neighbors. I think our sort of, let's say, better relations are built on two fronts, of course, from the political elite, but also from the educated youth, as a way of bringing us closer and seeing that our future is together, not under in a small apartment all together, but maybe in a big apartment building that is the EU, and as good neighbors and not as squabbling roommates. So that's what I would say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we went through the panel, but allow me, I think the time frame allows it, to raise some questions to you, listening exactly to you. I think you were all speaking about regional cooperation. It's one of the themes. May I say, the regional cooperation which is existing, I think, is not enough. I would say it went down. I think by the Stability Pact, by the pressure of the European Union and from the United States, we had a system of stick and carrot to move it. I think what the Regional Cooperation Council and the Southeast European Cooperative Process, SSEP, is doing is not enough. I think they are the old projects, I think you have mentioned it, they are all from the Stability Pact. I'm mentioning this not to be proud of this. I think it has to be developed because things are going on and you are missing a lot in this regional cooperation. Cooperation with the different countries between European institutions, other institutions is quite good. The cooperation under yourself is not good. If I'm looking to infrastructure, you have still no working airline system and airline systems not the most important, infrastructure is quite more important, and so on and so on. I think, why is it, and what would I want you to do more on this subject? I think I was deeply impressed, especially by you, about the role of history. I'm a fan of history, I have to confess, and I'm very much working on this. I'm the chair of the Center for Democracy and Reconciliation in Southeast Europe, based in Thessaloniki. It's a Dutch foundation. We are working on the history books, and so on and so on. Here I have my specific experience. I think the history books of the region by majority are a nightmare, because here you have all greater, I don't mention the name, you can take it for all the states here existing, and there's no real movement to overcome history because you cannot live out of history. I think if you have already started to join the problem of Alexander the Great, if you will arrive in the 21st century, it's quite a long way to go. So far, I think, necessary history, but how can we overcome this? Don't forget, the European Union or the integration process was created by overcoming the tensions between France and Germany. I think that was an outstanding process. I have to confess, the first history book done between France and Germany appeared in 2006. So far you have some times until you will arrive at this date, but I think the process should be bigger. And you are mentioning sometimes more the history than the future. I think you have a common history with all the difficulties, but you shall have a common future within Europe. So my second question with you. The third question is, I think, thank you very much for mentioning culture. I think it's a rich term of the region and it should be used more. I think we have the Youth Festival in Novi Sad, we have the Sarajevo Film Festival, and. I think every country can mention something what we are doing, but it should be pushed more forward. Forget the governments in this context, it's up to the civil society, to the artists and so on, which they are doing. We have marvelous artists from your region, where in Vienna. I think they shall be the region. I think you need them. The contribution in Vienna is outstanding coming from your countries, and that's touching the next question, what can we do against brain drain? That's extremely important. I think it's a question of attractiveness. It's a question for you, for your future. If they are not here, I think the future for you is quite much limited. Last question, and then I'm stopping to fiddle on your nerves. I think there was no contribution from your side. What is the perspective of Europe seen from your side? Because we are in change. Europe was dominating for some centuries the whole world. This is changing. I think they are coming up not only the BRIC countries as a total change. And it might be that we are arriving, what Peter Sloterdijk said, that Europe is an appendix of the Asian continent. Looking to the globals, it's right. But I think by the role, it's quite another question. So far, I was putting in this question. It's up to you. Open, who wants to make some comments on this? Everybody shocked? No. Thank you.
I would like to add something to when you talk about regional cooperation. I think there are today really quite a number of different initiatives that exist. So we cannot say that intra-regional cooperation does not exist. I think that the main question is how effective and how successful it is.
Right.
So I think that there are still some obstacles in relations between countries. So these obstacles, of course, make it very hard that this regional cooperation would be more successful. Legacy of war is still very present, and I think that also these countries like to see these regional cooperation forums with suspicion. There is a problem of mutual trust between countries. I think that most of these initiatives were also encouraged by external actors, by outside of the region. And this, of course, also can create problems of identification and motivation. So I think that that countries need to continue with their efforts, but I believe that improvement of communication and trust between different peoples can be really achieved if it follows also general improvement of political, social, and economic lives. I think that if economic and political situation in country is very bad, then this of course means that there is also much more room for nationalistic tendencies, political extremism, tensions, and so on. I also think that these initiatives were mainly encouraged by EU, and the approach of EU is still mainly top-down. So I think that wider involvement of non-state actors is important. So civil society, universities, medias, local experts. I think that this pressure from below is needed in order to speed up this process of regional cooperation. And I would like to say that also in order to improve cooperation between people, also I think that a topic that is very important is
It would be an additional speech.
Yeah.
Okay, Ms. Father, please. What is Kosovo saying?
Thank you very much. I'll try to keep it short. With regard to the regional cooperation, the first question, I think there are plenty of tools. There can be plenty of tools and ways in the future for the regional cooperation, but there is a lack of will at the moment. So instead of developing strategic ways or other tools, we should work more on the side of creating the real will between the stakeholders in the region to cooperate regionally, and that has to do with the interest that they see in cooperating regionally, especially in economic development. And I think that's something that we by ourselves should see as an interest at our own benefit, and I'm sure that this will develop in the near future, and we will have a better cooperation. With regard to the history, as you rightly mentioned, if we go back to the European Union, the first treaty on coal and steel community, it was not. It was less than in 8 years, if we see from this perspective, after the Second World War, which was at the time. So I do believe that yes, we do need to know about the history, but we have plenty of other priorities in the meantime, short-term and medium-term priorities. Everybody in the country, instead of dealing with the history, which will not help any of the countries in the region to develop a future. While for the brain gain, everybody should try to give her own contribution in the country first, and not go and show the talent in EU. There are plenty of talents in EU. We need to have EU seeing the talents in the region.
Thank you very much. Before I deliver the possibility of the floor to Mrs. Shaferovic, may I add one question? I beg your pardon, I don't want to fill on your nerves because I think it's a question that moves me very much. How long will it last until all the politicians in Bosnia and Herzegovina are deciding that they want Bosnia? For the moment, I have the impression they don't want their own country. What can the young generation do that they have the conviction you showed here?
To be honest, when I asked the word, I was I could notice the digression you made after my speech, especially about the words proud to be a citizen of Bosnia and Herzegovina. I need to say one thing. I think that this is the first time that young people from Bosnia and Herzegovina participate as a team. Not two teams, not individual, but as one team in Bosnia and Herzegovina. If you see back there in the back of the room, you will see 20 young people, students, all over Bosnia and Herzegovina, with a variety of nations and religions, saying, we are citizens of Bosnia and Herzegovina. We want to be proud citizens of Bosnia and Herzegovina. We love this country and we want to do better. And that is first step towards better.
And hopefully as soon successful. Mr. Bled.
First I have to say that I'm very impressed by your comments now, and this is the right way to speak about your country, and so this is how we can see that Bosnia and Herzegovina has the future if young people want to have it, want to build it. I would like to comment on something Dr. Buzek said earlier about the civil society and how we shouldn't be concerned about the government, what are they doing, but to work within the civil society to cooperate. I noticed that there is a lot of cooperation among our countries in the civil society. We have a lot of, at least in Montenegro, a lot of international music festivals, film festivals, art, all kind of culture festivals. We have all kinds of NGO initiatives, and people are coming from all over ex-Yugoslavia to have some meetings, to build some kind of cooperation, or to have some small projects that will be available to their society. But what is the main problem here is the lack of government lack of will of the governments to cooperate among themselves. And I'm not speaking about the forums and meetings and those short-term talks about how we have great neighborhoods. I'm talking about the real problems. For example, the EU has a lot of, the EU countries have low-cost airlines. They have a lot of connections. They have, for example, very cheap train tickets, and so on. We have no cooperation among airlines. We have, for example, in Montenegro, we cannot decide how to start building the highway that we need to connect with Serbia and through Serbia to the EU. Also, we have a lack of will to cooperate in catching criminals and catching people who are working within our borders and building some kind of. They have very strong criminal networks that are working, that are operating, and that are simply not doing good to our country because they export criminals to the EU, and we are doing nothing. I mean, we are maybe doing something, but it's not visible. We cannot say that we are successful in preventing that kind of criminal activities. So these are the things that the governments must do. And when we speak about the past, let the courts, let the police, let the regional initiatives such as RACOM, let them deal with that. And let the government people start thinking about the future and start thinking about about the fact that these are our neighbors and that we have to live with them. You mentioned Germany and France. So it was a long way to go from 1871 and 1914 and 1945, but then they succeeded, and now they are a pillar of the European Union. So this is something we have to achieve here in Western Balkans. Thank you.
Thank you very much for comment. Allow me to add, it was not only in 1871 and so on and on between Germany and France, it was for 3 centuries. It's quite a long story, and it was deep-rooted. But this is another question. I think all of you did not mention the European perspective. For the region, yes, but in general what Europe means. But maybe you are concentrated on your own problems, which I'm understanding. But now I think question and answer period for the audience. I think, please, you were the first. Please identify yourself. Are there any possibility? Okay.
Thank you very much, Dr. Busek. I'm Andrew Page. I'm the British ambassador here in Slovenia. And I too want to focus, as you've suggested, on the wider European perspective, what's going to happen to the EU by 2020. I wanted to start by saying I very much liked Ivan's analogy of a block of flats. Made me think of how Britain and France have had neighbouring flats for a long time and been squabbling there, and wondering whether the block is a tower block, which is more like a Tower of Babel in Brussels with all the different languages, or indeed a leaning Tower of Pisa with the Eurozone kind of putting pressure on it to topple over at the moment. So I think one of the questions you do need to address is what kind of an EU might you all be in by 2020? It could be a very different EU from the one we're seeing today. We could be in a very different economic conjuncture as well from the very difficult one we've seen over the last 2 years, which I think has caused the momentum for EU enlargement to slow down somewhat. Britain is amongst those that are the greatest advocates and champions of keeping up the pace of enlargement. And obviously we're looking forward to seeing Croatia come in, but indeed other Western Balkans countries too. And I would be interested in your views on the timescales for that. But I'd also like to hear what you think about what more the region can do amongst yourselves. And I'm thinking now of the Burdo process, which involves the 7 countries represented here, plus Albania, an initiative by Slovenia and Croatia, which I thought was a very sensible one, trying to see how much you can leave behind some of the legacy issues of the past, resolve bilateral issues that still exist between you, and assist you all in your movements towards the EU. What's your view of that perspective? I know the original intention behind it from Slovenia and Croatia was to do something a little bit like what the Visegrad countries did before they came into the EU together. And finally, the last reflection I would have, having been here 2.5 years as British ambassador, is I'm very struck by the fact that in Slovenia, the very large proportion of those who are in politics and in government and in parliament have all been around in politics, parliament and government for 20 years. And I think it's very important that by 2020 there's a lot of new blood coming into those areas. What is going to attract new blood into those areas? What does it take to make people like you want to go into government rather than staying in maybe academia or in civil society or in various kind of activist groups behind the scenes? Thank you.
Thank you very much, especially for the last remark. But I think that you have also a possibility towards Great Britain. Please ask the ambassador when they will join the Eurozone.
No.
You're the next.
Yes, well...
Micro.
Thank you.
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3
My name is Tevan Gajic. I'm a PhD student from the University of Belgrade. If I would have to agree with someone from the floor, that would be Emina. And I think that her perspective was the most realistic one out of all. There are several questions that are not being asked. First of them is, do young people want to join the EU? I come from Serbia, and Serbia has came a long path from 2000 until today. We have to remember that in 2000, when the Milosevic regime was stopped down, people who are now able to vote were 8 years old. And now they're 18 and 19. And now they have the right to vote. And I've met a lot of them, and I wouldn't say that they're very much Euro enthusiastic. That is one thing. Because you mentioned the policies of sticks and carrots. If I make an analogy with Stanley Kubrick's Shining, and the famous sentence by Jack Nicholson, I would say, all sticks and no carrots makes Jack a dull boy. And I think that's exactly what happens to young Serbs. For the last 11 years, we've heard a lot of demands from the EU and no true initiative. Today, Serbia is on a choice to give up part of its territory for a blurry perspective of joining one international organization. And I would like to hear, is there any state in the world that did that, or would it be a precedent? Another thing is, does the EU want...
No speech.
Okay. Yeah, I have a question. Does the EU want Serbia? Angela Merkel, the Prime Minister the Chancellor of Germany, was recently in Belgrade, and she said that the enlargement process is actually blocked, and that after Croatia there is no perspective for other countries so far. And EU today is not as sweet carrot as it was 10 years ago. We see a lot of economical problems. We see what's going on in Greece, Portugal, perhaps Italy.
This is known. I think a question and that's it.
No, it's just a comment, yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Okay, here, and then we are going backwards.
Do you want Coach to say it? I have Christian Jerzic, Austrian Television. I have only one simple question, and maybe you can answer it. Regional cooperation. When you have visited last time the country of the other participant in this panel, for example, Macedonia, when you have been last time in Sarajevo, Sarajevo, when you have been last time in Ljubljana, or when you have been last time in Skopje or in Podgorica, and vice versa. And how your university...
Belgrade, have you been in Pristina?
Okay, yes, and how your universities do cooperate at all? Because, I mean, you have not really a cooperation, it's not possible even to have a clear cooperation between university in Kosovska Mitrovica and between Pristina. I know there's problems to get faxes and documents from one university to another by an Austrian initiative. So how you really cooperate, and what do you know about the other country?
Okay, thank you. Now we are going third row.
Okay, my name is David Bonger. I'm representing the International Organization of the French-Speaking Countries. We're about 56 countries, member states countries. We are dealing about human rights, linguistic and cultural diversity, and education, formation, and economical sustainable development. My question is about, some people have raised the issue about human rights and minorities. I just want to listen what you want to, how your country or the youth of your country are coping with this kind of problem. Minorities, I mean, by minorities, I mean not only ethnical issues, but also sexual orientation and linguistic minorities, etc. Thank you.
Concerning gender, I mean in good shape. Yeah, backwards, here, and then last row. He's showing up.
I'll be very quick. I'm Tamara Gutman. I'm the Canadian ambassador to Hungary, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Slovenia. A lot of my focus is in Bosnia and Herzegovina on the Peace Implementation Council. One question that I've never had answered adequately is, what will it take for people in these countries, and in particular Bosnia and Herzegovina, to be active, to be demanding that the government, well, the government form in Bosnia and Herzegovina, but be demanding this of their government? There's a world of protests surrounding the region, whether it's in North Africa, in Greece, in the UK for that matter, and yet there's this sense of passivity amongst the general public of people not demanding what they want, and I'm curious why and what that's going to take.
Thank you. Last row.
My name is Visar Rama and I'm from Kosovo. Back to your point on history, I would like to recall that the term Balkans was invented in the 18th century to mark territories of this part of Europe which were still under the influence of the Ottoman Empire. And as many Western researchers have pointed out, this term does not refer only to a geographic position, but also it refers to the way and to distinguish it from the other parts of Europe. It is actually a paradigm by which the Europe thinks about this territory. And my question about you is how the way that the EU addressed this region and the perception it has about this region, how these influence the situations which we are facing today.
I only want to add, there's a beautiful book from Maria Todorova, historian from Bulgaria, Imagining the Balkans. I think she's moving in the right direction concerning the Balkans. I think this demony about the Balkans is really horrible, including what Winston Churchill said, the Balkans have more history as they can consume. That's totally right for whole Europe. I think not only for the Balkans. I think last two questions, first row and third row, and then the panel, because I have to look also to the time frame.
Yeah. Hello everyone, my name is Nevena Jovanovic, I come from Belgrade and I'm here in the name of Belgrade Fund for Political Excellence. Thank you all, the panelists, for great speeches and pointing some main issues. And our dear panelists from Slovenia pointed some main unsolved problems between our countries, especially between Greece and Macedonia, Serbia, Kosovo, situation in Bosnia. And regarding to that, I would like to ask all the panelists, what do you think? Can we talk about some kind of solution? If we all the time can hear stories about some kind of leadership in the region, my opinion is that if we all the time talk about some kind of leadership in the region, talking about Croatia or Serbia, we cannot make some steps forward. If you all the time can hear stories about leadership, then we cannot make some real cooperation between us and realize that only through joint forces we can make strong region. And thank you to our colleague from Bosnia for pointing the issue about how do they feel actually in Bosnia, and if we all would think like that way, I think that in 2020 we will be very close to the EU. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm Walter Lichem from Austria. My question to you is, to each one of you, is what is your vision of the future of the single identity nation state at a time when all our societies everywhere are moving to the pluri-identity state? And remembering just the 1981 census in Yugoslavia, there were 22 different national identities identified. That means each one of you is not really a single identity nation state right now. You have minorities, reminding us of the League of Nations, whose biggest office, by the way, led by by Slovenian, was the office for minorities. It was bigger than the political department. And it did not provide really the answers. So the question is, single identity nation state or pluri-identity society and state, where the capacity for otherness that's understood as an asset, like the Canadians have so well articulated, and not as a threat, is a key strategy for societal development. Another key word I will raise it now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. May I add, but this is a longer discussion, I think this multicultural aspect in other European countries and elsewhere is happening by migration. I think this is a real change. Here we have the problem of history. That's quite different so far. I think partly the Balkans are amidst the 19th century and this developing of the nation state. I think we are partly overcoming it, but partly the nation state is also back in the European discussion in a very bad way, but this is my personal position. So, I think in the panel, I don't want to keep the rule. Who wants to start to make it more vivid? Please.
Hello, everyone. I've heard several very interesting questions, especially continuously repeating the situation in Bosnia and Herzegovina, emphasizing it as to be a huge thing. To be honest, yours was the last question about one nation, several nations, comparing with the former Republic of Yugoslavia. My mother was born in Yugoslavia, and every time when she speaks about that period, she emphasized that they all felt like Yugoslavian. They were Bosnian, Croats, but they really did felt. And today in Bosnia and Herzegovina we have three presidents, one Serb, one Croat, one Bosniak. But if we, as we did show it today, that young people can be hoping to feel proud as citizens of Bosnia and Herzegovina, then I really wouldn't care if the one president we had would be Bosniak, Croat, or Serb. If he felt like a citizen of Bosnia and Herzegovina, he wanted to do the best for his country, I couldn't care less if he will be Bosniak, Serb, or Croat. About young people wanting to join the EU, when you are signing for applications to go to a PhD, master course all over Europe, there is European citizenship or overseas side or other. It is very inconvenient to fill the other one. So, do we want to join the EU? Of course we do want to join the EU. It's a perspective. It's higher education forms, it's better education, it's ability. We recently had the non-visa liberalization treatment. It felt like a freedom so that you can travel all over Europe without filling a bunch of forms. So we do really want to join the EU to how to say, at least go to European unions, educate ourselves, and then, what's most important, go back to our country and to do what we could do the best in our field of studies. Also, there are several questions, so I'm going to do it. What you can do to make young people join politics? You can make it fair. You can make politics fair. That the best one really wins. That we do have young people joining politics, but after a few years they lost their enthusiasm and they feel that they cannot accomplish anything because they are under the stress of the older ones. And you can make politics fair with less of corruption, with equality systems, that education is the priority in getting places, and what to do to make people more active, not passive. We need to show people that one person can make a change, and then they will be active, not passive. Because most of the people are thinking, I'm one person, I cannot do anything. Last night we sit in my room, all 20 of us, speaking about speech and generally the situation in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and each one of them felt, wow, I'm not the only one. And that is what we need to do to make people more active. We need to show them that their activity is appreciated, that they can do better, step by step. That is all I can say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Busek. I'll try to give a couple of perspectives on the questions and comments that were raised. Starting with the ambassador's comment on what would EU like, it would be different in 2020 from that what we have seen or we are seeing today. As a young Albanian living in Kosovo, I don't care whether EU will be sort of in a position to bring all these Western Balkan countries in due to internal problems. All I care is, instead of being in EU, being like EU. So it's not that we really want, we don't see EU as a paradise, something that once you are in, then you have saved all the problems. As my colleague mentioned earlier, my friend Ivan said that we don't think that once we are in EU, we have solved all our problems. But what we want to see is that we want to see things being discussed in our countries, like those that are being discussed in your countries. The economic development, economic crisis, climate change, prosperity, human rights, discussing about things that are being discussed, being at the level the EU states are at least now, and I'm sure that they will be in a better position in 2020, no matter what challenges we will face in the past. And this comes linking to the comment of Canadian ambassador as well, that this comes from the demand that we in those countries will have towards our government and being more active in playing the role that we can play in these societies, as well as getting rid of those type of governments that have been up to now. That is the main obstacle for the integration and the prosperity in those countries, because there are tight links between the government. When the government, the politicians are not that different from the criminal networks and those that are corrupted, then we don't know why they are there and for what purposes, what they are governing, the criminal networks and corruptions, or the interest of the people. And that's why we have to be more active in order to make this change back there in our countries, so that we are at a better level comparing to the EU countries. And I'm sure that EU will have a better future as well. It has coped with different crises in the past, and I'm sure that we'll handle this one as well.
Thank you very much, Basil. Ivan is the next, please.
I would just like to make two quick comments, and then I'll address some of the questions. First of all, I'd like to say I don't know if this is true today, but I know a few years ago, and maybe it is today, there weren't any flights from Belgrade to Zagreb, and I think that's criminal to not have flights between the two of the most important cities in the region. Another thing that, as Sanja mentioned about crime in the Western Balkans, I think the one thing that we can learn from it, and that's happened throughout the years of the war and now still, that there is great cooperation between criminal groups all over the region, and their cooperation is based on interest. And this is how the European Union started as well. For the coal and steel community, it was because of economic interest, and I think we can also learn from that, even if we it's all in our interest to cooperate so we can progress together, at least economically, but in many other ways as well. I would like to address the question of the gentleman who asked about human rights and minorities. I think as far as ethnic minorities, the situation is quite good all over the Western Balkans. But as far as sexual minorities, I think it's not good at all. There's a great conflict. I mean, because I think in the public, it's, sexual minorities is still viewed upon as something that's not natural, which is of course not the right way to go about it, and the governments then don't also encourage this thought that it's something perfectly normal to be a sexual minority, and that you shouldn't you should fit into society very well just because of that. I mean, last year in Serbia we had a gay pride parade, and I believe in Zagreb there was one this year as well, which sparked that there had to be a lot of police protection, and which is not good. I think the state itself has to make more progress in that way for it to be more accepted in society as something that's not strange at all. I would also like to address the British ambassador's question about the government and how if youth have an incentive to go into government. I believe that that youth do have an incentive to go into government, but I think that youth who are idealistic quickly get disillusioned with government or in any form. But of course, people who are opportunistic and pragmatic usually go into it for other reasons, not to make a change, but to live a comfortable life, which is not the right way to go about it as well. And I would also like to address the Canadian ambassador's question, what will it take for people to demand change? I believe, at least in Serbia, there's a bit of fatigue from all the protests that happened before, and I mean, even now, the younger generation, I don't think, has much motivation to go into a big sort of protest for change, and I'm actually not quite sure if they really know what they specifically want to change. There's more of a feeling that something needs to be changed than this and this and this needs to be changed. That's it.
Thank you very much. Allow me two comments. One is concerning fighting criminality. We founded this cross-border crime fighting center in Bucharest. I think it is partly a success story. The real problem is, and I was closely cooperating with Interpol and Europol, that Europol said to me, not even the member states of the European Union are delivering all the informations which are necessary to fight criminals. And on the other side, the criminals are borderless. I think technically on a high level, so far on their side it is a success story, and we need more efforts in this direction. I think it is extremely important. I think, Sonia?
Quickly address a few questions. First of all, very important and interesting question about single identity state or pluri-identity state. Coming from Montenegro, I say definitely pluri-identity state without a doubt. So I believe that we can succeed in building a true and we have, at least in Montenegro, a true multicultural state. And we don't see it as a country of Montenegrins, but a country, a civil society where all nations are cooperating and living together. And now we have the discussion about the official language. So we have the official language Montenegrin, but we also want to make sure, and the discussion is going on, to make sure that the Bosniaks and Serbs and Albanians and Croatians have a chance to study their language in the schools. So this is something that I'm not sure if we will succeed in the right way, but it at least shows that we want to make it work. When we speak about the EU, what kind of the EU we might have in 2020, or whether whether do we want to join the EU, the young people. I believe that the EU will succeed in solving the problems, the financial problems, but the fact is that the EU maybe was not cautious enough in receiving former countries like Bulgaria or Romania, and now there is a problem. So I believe that these problems will be solved, but and I think Dr. Buzek mentioned it, the fact that the nation state is now maybe even more being mentioned in the EU is something that the EU should maybe be aware of, because that can lead to many problems. And whether do we want to join the EU? As my colleague from Kosovo said, we want to have the way of life of the EU. So the EU is not it's not an end. It's not something our specific goal. It should not be. Our specific goal should be economic prosperity and political stability. And when we achieve that, then we will be welcomed in the EU, and then we will be able to contribute to the EU in the right way. And well, another question, and I will be very short. When will the people start demanding, and when will the people start, I don't know, protesting when they want to change? A question from the Canadian ambassador. I believe that still we are living in some kind of a parochial political culture, we cannot, we don't feel that the institutions are there for us. We are just receiving information and saying, okay, it's not up to me, I cannot change anything. So when we improve from that parochial democratic culture, parochial political culture to democratic one, when we see that institutions are there to make our lives better and not that we are here to make the institutions work better, then we will bring that change. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just to add what you said about Europe, I think I'm very much in love with the two half sentences of Jacques Delors. He said you cannot love a common market, which for sure is true. And the other sentence is, I think we have to give Europe a soul, which means content. I think this is covering, and on this we have to work beside all institutional discussions. I think Slovenia wants to make a remark.
I would just like to answer quickly to a question. If EU wants Serbia or the rest of the countries, of course now is the time of enlargement fatigue in the EU, high unemployment rates even in some EU members, public hostility toward immigration and so on. But I think that the EU must know that the cost of non-integration are actually much higher for EU than the cost of integration. Clearly the EU does not want to be paralyzed by a group of countries lagging behind in different areas and so undermining overall effectiveness and credibility of the EU. However, the EU must also be careful not to burden countries on the waiting list too much with inadequate demands. So I think the EU must send a more clear message to these countries that they are a part of the rest of the Europe, that they very much belong to this continent, and I think that the EU could do that with that it would increase the scope and intensity of support for these countries. I think that also looking economically, that would not be a much burden for the EU, which is a market of 500 million people, and Western Balkans only to 23 million. So I think that the EU should put more effort in that.
Thank you very much. Croatia is the last.
Thank you. This is a very serious discussion with many questions raised, and one of the questions I heard here is, do young people want to join EU? I would say there is maybe a pre-question. How much do we know to decide whether we want to join or not to join EU? Young people in Croatia do not have any type of education which would tell them what is European Union. They don't even know what is the ex-Yugoslavia, what happened in ex-Yugoslavia that caused separation or disintegration, and where do they live now. So the issue of European Union is the secondary issue, I would say, in our educational policy. First, we have to address our locality, our past. Another thing that I find extremely worrying is that our countries do not respect decisions of their citizens. I don't know if you remember, and if I'm corrected, but Slovenian citizens decided on first referendum not to join EU, and then the government made everything to make them join EU. So this is something that I'm quite interested in, and this is going to happen in Croatia, I'm aware of that. And there is a growing Euroscepticism in Croatia, but not always information-based, since we do not have very much information-based EU information policy. People believe, on one hand, they are going to have better lives in EU. On the other hand, they mostly believe EU is going to take our national identity. I'm much more interested in how we are going to live on the European labor market, where we have at least 5 million of young people not employed, or where we have very strict Schengen regimes, where we have very discriminatory policies towards national minorities, sexual minorities, and so on. This is also this is also EU. EU is not something good that is going to offer us very good opportunities on all levels. We also have to speak about other EU that is very discriminatory, very restrictive, and very non-developing in many cases. And when coming from the Western Balkans, if you want to name it so, or Yugoslavia or ex-Yugoslavia, where we are facing all those things, I'm asking myself, why do I want more of that? And if you ask me, do I want to live in a plural society or a single identity, we've never lived in single identity society. And I was born in Yugoslavia, now I live in Croatia, I have to call it this way. I was born somewhere in the world, doesn't matter. I want pluralist society, and that doesn't have to be called European Union, and I don't want it to be called European Union. I think Europe has much more expanding, developing perspectives and doesn't have to be limited with different boundaries. And I think our perspective and our future is not to be obsessed with restrictions and boundaries on all levels. Our perspective is open perspective or open-minded perspective, where we are going to look for ideologies and paradigms that are maybe developing in 21st or 22nd century. I think we have to think much more in advance.
Thank you very much for this positive perspective. Concerning losing identity, I think I may tell you out of the history of Austria, there was a strong movement as we joined the European Union. We will lose our identity because it's a second Anschluss, like in 1938. That's one of the most impressive nonsense I ever heard, because we are now more on distance to Germany than ever. And I think our own role was empowered by the European Union, especially by the downfall of the Iron Curtain. And we are very sensitive, because there's a famous word of an Austrian writer, Karl Kraus. He said Germans and Austrians are speaking the same language, and that's the difference. So far, if you know how we are speaking German, there's really a difference. I may say, beg your pardon, all the Germans who are present here, and so on and so on. Many thanks to the panel, and many thanks to the audience. I think it was quite important that we are doing so. I will tell Miriam Moskand, I'm really convinced that such a panel of the young generation should put in the main program. To have a dialogue, I think, with the grown-up and so on, because it's not their future, it's your future. And so far we have to discuss with them. Hopefully you have the possibility to join the other events and to be outspoken as you have been here. I think there's a lot to do, and for this I wish you all the best. Many thanks for your participation and for discipline. What is it named? Round Table A is closed.